This is the first video in a series of 6. And for this one, Joanna, we're going to focus on the coronavirus in and of itself, the crisis that we're all in the middle of, but also ways in which we might be able to support children and teenagers to understand what's going on. And really looking at it, I suppose, in terms of also how our own stress and anxiety in caring for children can be contagious in a way that we might think of it.
And how it can work both ways. And I think that's really important to hold in mind, is that we know that our children take their emotional and behavioural cues from us, their parents. They have a feeling, they look to us to get a read on how we're feeling, and that then tells them, should I be feeling this way even more so, or is this not so bad and I can calm down? And the positive reframing of that is, if we're anxious, of course our children are going to pick up on that and act out of it. But also, if we can check in with ourselves and find a way to self-regulate and lower those anxiety cortisol levels in ourselves, equally our children will look at us and pick up on that. So it's a little bit like going inwards to parent outwards, and that's really, really important. But to do that, we have to be able, I think, Janet, to look and see, how is this affecting us? And it's affecting all of us. Our everyday lives have absolutely changed at the moment, and we're in a state of uncertainty that we don't know how long this is going to go on for. And certainly what I'm seeing practice-wise and what people making contact is that in a state of uncertainty, that tends to push us upward into a state of heightened arousal, where we're simply locked in, looking for signs that we are right to feel the way that we do. You know, it's like having that emotional bruise. You know it hurts, but you keep touching it to make sure it still hurts. We just love to be right about how we're feeling. So I think if we know that we're locked into that heightened state, what strategies could we use to self-regulate so that we can co-regulate our children?
I think that's a really important point, and I suppose I'm kind of struck by that idea of what's uncertain and what's unknown. And of course, in the context in which we're in, what's unknowable at this point in time, you know, and in a way, in the vacuum of information, we can fill it with all kinds of thoughts that we might have about what's going to happen. And I suppose I'm thinking of it in the way in which this is also something that happens to children. In the absence of information, they will create all kinds of fantasies about what it is that might happen or what's going on, because of course there's been a huge upheaval in children's lives and in families' lives. Everything has been turned on its end. Things that we might never have been able to conceive of before have now kind of presented themselves in technicolor, and that aspect, I suppose, I'm very aware, Joanna, from the kind of encounters and exchanges that I've been having and queries that I've been having from families more recently, particularly picking up on what you were saying there around the anxiety. One aspect of it is, well, what do I tell them, you know? And the fear perhaps that's associated with actually coming clean in some degree to what it is that's happening, and the fact that this is something and it's affecting us all.
I think you're so right. And I think part of what happens in the face of these difficult questions and difficult conversations is, and it comes from such a good place in all of us as parents, is we want to protect our children, we want to reassure them, and in doing so we can rush to minimize their fear and minimize their feelings. And far from helping them, what that actually tells them is, it's not okay to come to me with that question. I'm not ready to give you an answer. So I generally take a really practical baseline approach to this, that when a child asks a question, they are ready for the answer to that question. And that's really important, because as soon as your child says, what's this COVID-19 or what's the coronavirus, it doesn't mean take a deep breath and brace yourself, here comes the science. You know, what it means is taking a breath and saying, what a great question. I'm wondering, what do you think it means? Getting a read on where their current level of knowledge is. And then that gives you an opportunity to correct that information or build on it. But give a little bit, check how that's sitting, and that might be enough for now. They'll go off, they'll play, they'll go about their day, they'll come back to you, either to repeat the question to see is the answer still the same, or to grow that information and find out more. And I think that's a really important way of doing it. But just coming to mind as we're talking about this, and I might throw it in here, is a little play solution to that, is, you know, that children learn through play, as we know, that we can talk to them, but particularly when they're anxious, they mightn't be able to take in those words. And the best way for them to understand a situation is to do it. So one thing you could do is role play it out. Role play being a newsreader, bringing on an expert contributor to ask questions. And you could, I have a bottle here, but at home you could use a hairbrush or anything you might have, a little karaoke microphone perhaps. And I might be the person who's asking my parent, the expert, I have important questions for you about corona. And I ask you a question and then I hand you the mic and you give me the appropriate answer. I ask you another one. And we actually role play being news reporters because children are so aware of the news right now. Equally, you could take your phone or your tablet and design a little radio broadcast between you, or design your own newspaper where they can put in some news about this and many other good news stories about their day, their relatives, who they're talking to. But taking some kind of a role play puts them in role to still work it out, but it's not directly coming at them, they're experiencing it in a doing, not saying way. I just find that's really effective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's interesting. I'm thinking too, in that moment, if you're caught on the hop, you know, and you're saying, you know, that ability to be able to be available and present. And sometimes that can be really difficult if you're caught up with something, or if the demand is there because you're trying to juggle work and home and, you know, everything in between. And there's a really good sentence that often I share with parents, which can be like a really magic little holding piece, which is that idea that if your child asks you a question that in that moment you're really struggling with, or you just are kind of think, how am I going to word this? How am I going to get this across? And that question, which is, that's a really good question. That response that just says, that's a really good question, and I can totally see why it is that you'd like to know that information. And I don't have that at the minute. So can I find that out and come back to you? And we can follow this up. So it allows just that moment of like breath, and you know, we can go in there and we can get the information that we need to be able to relay, but it contains the child.
It does,
and says, I'll be back to you, and
invites them in to be part of that discovery together. We'll find this out together, we'll work it out.
Absolutely.
And it cues them as well that it's okay not to know everything.
And I think for teenagers too, you know, we're kind of thinking you know, through this series at various ages, you know, and from a developmental perspective, and I'm thinking of how this links with a kind of adolescent experience of that need to be able to separate out from the parent, to form ideas and opinions and a mind of one's own, and how part of that really is that kind of pulling and the back and forth part of that. I'm wondering about ways, and I suppose I'm thinking of how being able to have these conversations at depth with your teenager, being able to take their perspective and think, God, you know, because I suppose we're aware there's huge issues, particularly for exam years, and for those, the lack of certainty is causing huge anxiety. But I'm thinking of the importance of being able to hold your teenager in that experience and valuing their experience of it, and what their take on it is.
And I think with teenagers, you can afford to be much more open, honest, and direct. And I think it's really important that we are comfortable sharing our own discomfort with them and our own fears, and that we can say, you know, actually, I'm finding this a lot. I'm wondering how you're feeling, but certainly I'm a little overwhelmed today. I think I've been online too much. I think I've been exposed to too many news updates or too much social media, and I'm feeling that in my body. So I'm just sharing that with you to say, I probably need to do something. I might, you know, go for a 2-kilometer walk or whatever it is, and I'm inviting you to come with me because I need the support, so that you're making them part of the solution. And I think that's really important, that we reframe this, that teenagers are a problem. I just don't see it that way. I think they can be a very positive solution focus. I think you can also appeal to them that, you know, I have so much on, I'm overwhelmed, I've got dozens of things on my mind to do, I need your help. I wonder, can you help me with the little ones? Could you do a bit of schoolwork with them in the mornings? I need your help here, and bring them in as a co-parent nearly
and acknowledge the loss that they're experiencing, because as teenagers, the social group is utterly important, you know, in terms of they become your family, you know, in the teenage life, and that transition into the big bad world, you know. But I think too, what I'm hearing from a lot of teenagers is the phone isn't enough. So there's a sense of connectedness online, but people are really missing that experience of being with their friends.
And that's relatable, isn't it? That person-to-person piece is that, you know, my social engagement system is connecting with yours in the now, that can't be replicated on screen. Though again, to positively reframe that piece, I think our teenagers are definitely our digital natives.
Yes.
And they could model a little bit for us about how to stay. I mean, we've moved, to be fair, to teenagers from telling them, get off the phones and see your friends in real life, to get on the phones and don't see your friends in real life.
Yeah.
So we have to be, I think, do you know what it is? We have to top up our tolerance cups.
Yeah.
We have to all give each other a break, that we're going to have good days and bad days. But as we said at the beginning of this video, it starts and ends with checking in with yourself.
Absolutely.
How am I feeling right now? What am I thinking? What could I do to change those feeling states in myself? And that is the greatest gift that we could give our children right now.
Absolutely.